He wakes up sitting on a stone throne, surrounded by goblins bowing before him. He has no clue how he got there, or why these creatures think he's their lord and king. The last thing Oh Hyunmin remembers is being on his way back home. After working from dawn till dusk as a manager at an elite organization, he was absolutely drained and exhausted. Luckily, his eyes darted toward an empty seat, which he occupied without thinking twice. While riding the subway back home, closing his tired eyes and taking a quick nap didn't seem like such a bad idea. Or at least, that's what Hyunmin thought right before he found himself inside a murky den, sitting on a highly uncomfortable stone throne. He is perched up on a pedestal, while a big number of goblins below crowded the den, celebrating his arrival with excitement. They are thrashing around in a frenzied display of absolute bliss, sobbing tears of relief as if a multimillionaire savior has just materialized out of thin air to wipe away all their money problems. As for our boy, he is busy rubbing his eyes, trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. He surely isn't hallucinating, which means the alternative is equally terrifying. If only it were just a bad dream. But deep down, he seems to understand the gravity of the situation all too well. He is pretty sure that either he died from overworking for 3 consecutive years, or his mind has completely snapped. Taking a closer look at the creatures, he notices their pointy ears, familiar green skin, and diminutive stature. He would bet his life that he is looking at goblins, the exact kind of creatures you typically find in fantasy novels or video games. What makes the situation even more cockamamie is the fact that he can clearly understand their speech. They are hailing him as their lord, while weeping joyous tears. Encountering goblins with such fluency in the Korean language definitely wasn't on his bingo card. Furthermore, he hasn't the faintest idea why he is being crowned as their leader in the first place. Right then, a goblin child climbs up to the stage and offers him a piece of fruit, gesturing for him to eat it. Hyunmin picks up the alien object, albeit reluctantly. His hesitation stems from the simple fact that he has never seen a fruit of this kind before. What's even creepier is that it's pulsating, almost as if he's holding a living creature. All eyes are on him, brimming with anticipation, waiting for the exact moment their savior takes a nibble. Realizing what these creatures expect of him, he knows that refusing the offering would make him look incredibly ungrateful. But on a serious note, he absolutely does not want this creepy thing anywhere near his face, let alone in his mouth. Still, instead of letting fear paralyze him, he mentally says, "Screw it," and proceeds to take a bite. After all, what could possibly go wrong, apart from him dying of alien food poisoning? However, contrary to his grim expectations, his eyes widen the moment his taste buds register the bizarre delicacy. While he is having the time of his life devouring the most delicious fruit he has ever tasted, the goblins are simultaneously going bonkers with happiness. They are simply overjoyed that their lord loves the food. Suddenly, an agonizing pain pierces his skull, forcing him to drop to all fours. He feels incredibly dizzy, but before you assume he has been poisoned, it turns out he has just awakened his very own leveling system. According to the holographic window floating in front of him, he is currently the Lord of Red Rock Valley, a territory housing a meager population of 47 goblins. The most crucial detail, however, is that Hyunmin only has 4 days and 3 hours left before a territorial war takes place. Naturally, Hyunmin has no fucking idea what a territorial war even entails. The system registers his confusion and promptly addresses his curiosity. To put it simply, he has got to defend the resources and the subjects nestled within his domain. For a brief moment, Hyunmin is startled, recoiling backward when he hears the system's voice echoing directly inside his head for the first time. He soon realizes, though, that a feature named Wiki, listed in his stats, is the one answering his questions. Wiki chimes in once again, more than willing to spill the beans about the origin and history of these territorial wars. But Hyunmin couldn't care less about that historical bullshit. Right now, all he wants to know is where he is and how he ended up here, all the way from the subway. According to Wiki, he is currently stranded in the Demon Realm. As for his exact coordinates, Wiki flat out refuses to answer, claiming his territory level is too low to access that information. Needless to say, the ominous mention of a Demon Realm freaks him the hell out. He is practically dying to know more about his situation, but Wiki isn't interested in explaining anything else until his territory level rises. After wrestling a lot with this stubborn system that refuses to elaborate, a miserable Hyunmin slumps back onto his uncomfortable throne. He begins pinching himself, feeding himself raw hopium that it's all just a terrible nightmare he's going to wake up from any second now. Deep down, however, Hyunmin knows he is just gaslighting himself at this point. He has no choice but to face reality. Putting 2 and 2 together, he gathers that the system wants him to fight a war, an assumption Wiki positively confirms. And the subjects he is supposedly protecting are these hideous creatures before him. Taking another look at the crowd, he finally notices just how severely malnourished his new minions actually are. There is no way in hell he can win a battle against anyone with an army like this in tow. Forget fighting a war. Hyunmin could literally wipe the floor with these weaklings single-handedly if he wanted to. Damn sure that he is destined to lose at this rate, he directly inquires about the consequences of defeat. The system drops the bombshell upon his request. Losing the territory war means he could very well lose his actual life in the process. If his territory falls, his fate will rest entirely in the hands of the victorious opposing lord. And historical data dictates that 99.95% of defeats have resulted in the swift execution of the losing lord. Hyunmin is forced to reckon with just how undeniably fucked up and hopeless his situation really is. Ironically, it strongly resembles the exact kind of shit he was dealing with in his corporate life. Handed zero budget, zero competent manpower, and literally a fraction of the necessary time, he is somehow still expected to meet the absurd demands of his organization. But at the end of the day, he always managed to pull off the impossible back on Earth. Drawing on that resilience, he resolves to face his current predicament with that exact same conviction. He asks the system whether winning these wars and leveling up his territory will eventually allow him to return home. Surprisingly, the system responds positively. Now that is the kind of shit our boy was waiting to hear. Suddenly, he couldn't care less about how abysmally low his chances of winning are. He stands up and immediately begins brainstorming, ready to prepare for the imminent battle that is only 4 days away. He has made his mind, he is getting hell out of this place. Only 4 days, that is more than enough time for him to figure out how to deal with the impending mess. At the age of 33, Hyunmin had already earned the title of the youngest manager in his organization, and he was squarely in line to become its youngest executive as well. All these achievements he held under his belt were there for a reason. He knows the sheer power of working overtime. His core belief is that working overtime can make the impossible possible, so these goblins better prepare themselves mentally, because the time for them to clock in some serious overtime has officially arrived. Walking through the canyon where they are currently located, Hyunmin realizes that the entrance is narrow, but it fans out wider the further inside you go. This geological layout only makes his job more difficult, as terrain like this isn't exactly ideal for defense. When he asks the group for ideas, the dumb goblins have absolutely nothing to contribute, and the system's wiki outright refuses to answer. Well, whatever. Hyunmin had never actually asked that stupid wiki for tactical advice anyway. With few choices left, he decides to teach these clueless critters the basics before advancing to any high-level strategies. First and foremost, their main goal is to prevent intruders from breaching this narrow passageway. They will have to defend it, even if it costs them their lives. However, to defend it successfully, Hyunmin knows they must make the necessary preparations. He orders the goblins to form a 10-man squad responsible for scaling the canyon walls to chop down trees and craft sticks as tall as he is. Unfortunately, not only are these critters pathetically weak, but they are just as lazy. They literally start pointing fingers at one another, desperately trying to avoid taking on such a physically demanding task. But as the newly crowned lord of this den, Hyunmin knows exactly how to exercise his authority. He threatens the little bastards into sprinting off to fulfill their assigned duties. It dawns on him that these guys are exactly like low-tier corporate grunts. They only listen once you screech your lungs out at them. He then turns to the remaining goblins, assigning 15 of them to climb the canyon wall and pile up every stone they can find right on the edge of the cliff. The creatures immediately begin crawling their way up. Meanwhile, the rest of the herd is ordered to help him dig a massive pit right next to the entrance. The goblins don't waste a single second, plunging their bare hands into the dirt to plow through the earth. Even our boy is forced to get his hands dirty since there are 0 shovels available. But that's okay. He understands very well that desperate times call for desperate measures. By the end of the day, massive boulders have been lined up along the cliff's edge, and the squad has successfully acquired the much-needed pointy sticks to use as makeshift spears. Once everyone is gathered, Hyunmin makes sure to give them the credit they deserve for their hard work. Taking a closer look though, these guys look absolutely worse for wear after just the first day of prep. Their nails are broken, their knees are scraped, and they are covered head to toe in dirt. It genuinely makes Hyunmin question how they are going to progress at this sluggish rate. Right then, the system rewards Hyunmin with a new trait called Overtime. This trait allows the territory's residents to be 15% more efficient, feel less hunger, and consume less stamina. Hyunmin is incredibly grateful for the timely buff. Right now, even if his subjects look like they are on the brink of fainting, he cannot afford to let them stop. Still, for the time being, he grants them a brief moment of respite. Even though they have been busting their asses since noon, they are still far from ready. In fact, the real work hasn't even started yet. To encourage his defeated-looking souls, he lectures them on the true essence of working overtime. Overtime, he explains, is the vital process where you set the stage to tackle tomorrow's problems while everyone else sleeps soundly. Right now, working overtime might feel like a literal death penalty, but he assures them that every drop of sweat they shed today will save a drop of blood they might shed in the upcoming territorial war. Hyunmin raises his spear high, and with his voice reverberating through the canyon, he orders the goblins to chant the word "overtime" out loud. The once timid goblins follow suit. The veil of exhaustion and worry that had clouded their faces evaporates into nothingness. Unfortunately, that 300 Spartans' energy only lasts for a few minutes before everyone fizzles out like a fading boner, collapsing to the dirt in sheer exhaustion. Hyunmin realizes that winning is a pipe dream at this rate, especially given the pathetic condition of his troops. It's downright laughable to watch these hobos wielding rusty knives and random rocks as their weapons of choice. Since he lacks sheer brute force, he has to shift to a more strategic approach to offset the massive lack of manpower. The one silver lining is that the enemy they are supposed to face is also a goblin tribe, which practically guarantees the opposition won't have advanced gear either. Since goblins are baseline dumb, victory won't come down to who has the better weapons, but rather who uses their weapons better. He recalls the golden words of a certain group's leader from his past life. Back on Earth, he had learned that ancient military texts often contain a wealth of wisdom applicable to business management. To brainstorm ideas, Hyunmin used to spend his free time reading books related to the art of war. From those texts, he learned that the most effective way to fight an infantry battle is to line up troops shoulder to shoulder and march forward with spears in hand. This infamous, highly effective strategy is known as the phalanx formation. Given that he is dealing with enemies whose IQ hovers somewhere around room temperature, Hyunmin is certain that even a clumsy, half-baked imitation of this formation will get the job done. Consequently, he orders his illiterate minions to stand in one long, straight line. To our boy's deep disappointment, none of the critters have the faintest clue what the hell their lord is talking about. Sighing, Hyunmin grabs one goblin and physically plants him as a reference point. He then drags another goblin right next to him, and then another, and so on, and so forth. By the time he finishes, the army of uncivilized goblins is actually standing in a very civilized and disciplined manner. He demonstrates exactly how to hold the spear with the tip pointing forward and how to thrust it outward as they advance. The goblins try to closely imitate their lord, but one clumsy goof stumbles over his own feet, completely ruining the parade. The poor guy's eyes glint with tears, terrified of failing his master like this. Instead of raging, Hyunmin walks up to the trembling goblin and gently encourages him to try again. He waits for the squad to get back into formation and then makes them repeat the drill. After garnering years of corporate experience in his past life, Hyunmin had an epiphany. Unless you are born a genius blessed by the 7 stars, the only way to outperform others in any given task is through relentless practice. By repeating the exact same motion over and over, you can absolutely master it. And so Hyunmin spends the entire night running the goblins through grueling trial and error. He notices their hands trembling and their shoulders slumping. Hyunmin is all too familiar with this specific look. It is the exact expression of a new employee dragging themselves to the restroom to cry after getting their 3rd report rejected. The only difference Hyunmin is going to make here is that he won't let these goblins walk the path of the defeated employee who gives up. He will make them try over and over again until they succeed. The poor goblins spend their entire night drilling the formation. Even as dawn begins to break over the horizon, the exhausted creatures are strictly ordered to stand straight and continue the repetition. Every time they fail, they are penalized with repeating the same movement 10 more times. Right then, a goblin child walks up to our boy. He clearly wants to speak his mind, but he's visibly hesitant because what he has to say next is utterly devastating. The kid volunteers to offer himself up as food to the enemy so that the war can be called off. You see, it's a grim goblin tradition. If a tribe surrenders at least 3 young kidlings as a sacrifice, they don't have to fight. The kid doesn't mind being the sacrifice. He is just glad at the thought that his lord will be able to live, even if it costs the children their lives. Naturally, Hyunmin is absolutely furious. He refuses to even entertain the thought of sacrificing children just to compensate for his troops' incompetence. He addresses the entire tribe, loudly questioning if they would actually feel happy handing their own kids over as a midday snack. He points out that if they keep repeating this cowardly cycle, there will eventually be nothing left of their tribe at all. That is exactly why the only optimal solution they have is to fight to the death. Forget about handing over children, Hyunmin roars that he isn't offering a single grain of sand to anyone while this territory is under his management. The only thing their enemies are going to receive is a crushing and merciless offensive response so brutal that they will never even think of picking a fight again. Fired up by his speech, the entire herd is practically sent vibrating with adrenaline. And just like that, we cut right to the moment the territorial war officially begins. Under a murky red sky, the opposing Black Hill Goblins arrive. Waiting right on the other side of the canyon entrance stands our boy, flanked by his entirely reformed army of disciplined goblins. Watching the enemy forces carelessly charge forward into the narrow passageway, Hyunmin gives his subjects the final order to raise their spears. The goblins instantly snap into their combat stances as the enemy marches blindly toward them at rapid speed. Because Hyunmin has meticulously prepared for the absolute worst-case scenarios, he watches the approaching horde and smiles with such terrifying and unshakable confidence that you almost have to feel pity for the brainless fools he's up against. The stage is set. A handful of goblins were stationed above the ridge, ready to drop boulders with their prying sticks. Oh Hyunmin stood behind the phalanx of overtime trained main force facing the incoming invasion. They were vastly outnumbered and outmuscled. By all metrics, the Black Hill goblins were stronger and larger in number. Some of Hyunmin's soldiers recoiled, intimidated by the incoming charge. He yelled at them to maintain focus and stand their ground until those bastards fall into the pit they painstakingly dug. The Black Hill force's momentum came to a halt once the vanguard noticed the trap waiting for them. He watched with bated breath, waiting for the first enemy to fall. Although they were dumb, the opposing goblins weren't blind. They pumped the brakes as soon as the pit became visible. Unfortunately for them, the path was narrow, and relaying the threat all the way to the back was impossible. No matter how loudly the vanguard yelled at the rear, they couldn't stop the forward momentum. Just as planned, when the first few goblins fell, a cascade of green followed. They kicked and screamed, but those who were at the vanguard were swallowed by the simple trench. Oh, Hyunmin felt his confidence surge. The enemy was just as pathetic as his goblins were. Seeing the first domino of the plan succeed assured him that victory was as good as theirs. The stampede of Black Hill goblins continued for some time. They quickly filled the hole with tangled bodies. The more they squirm, the more entangled they become. It was a simple yet effective strategy. But once the hole was filled to the brim, the Black Hill goblins toward the back of the formation were able to use their comrades as a foothold to get past the pit. They trampled their fellow monster just to continue the attack. Once over half of them have crossed, retreat will be impossible. The first part of the plan neutralized a decent chunk of enemy forces. Now comes the real fight. Hyunmin trained his boys hard to make these opposing goblins regret ever setting foot on his territory. Now is the time to put that training into action. The second set of traps was sprung. Goblin-sized boulders came raining down on the unsuspecting victims. Up the ridge, the workflow was efficient. Goblins were split into pairs, one for dropping and another for reloading. Using gravity as their weapon decimated the next wave of enemies. They were using the terrain advantage to the best of their abilities. With how clumped the Black Hill goblins were, they were hitting nearly 100% of their drops. This strat was also very effective at killing enemy morale. It struck fear in the hearts of those who saw their comrades crushed by rocks. The death toll kept rising, but the Black Hill bastards weren't able to communicate properly, leading to even more casualties. Retreating was no longer an option, but pushing forward made them easy targets. With their heavily reduced numbers, there weren't enough left to force their way through the next leg. Those few who were stationed at the rear survived the rain of boulders in the pit, but they no longer have any advantage. So, Oh Hyunmin roused his main force to raise their spears just like they practiced. Gathering momentum, they advanced towards the narrow opening and started stabbing. The Black Hill fools basically ran to their deaths. Some of the phalanx soldiers felt queasy. They've never killed a fellow goblin before. That's where Hyunmin comes in to snap them out of shock and remember their training. Pull back, stab, repeat. As long as they remember what was drilled into their depleted muscles, they'll continue racking up kills. They cannot afford to give any sort of opening. The formation must be kept tight, elbow to elbow. Hyunmin was moving like a genuine floor general. With every kill under their belt, the confidence of his goblins grew. For every advance order, the more fluid their movement and stabs became. At this point, the Black Hill goblins were petrified. They've never encountered an organized infantry like this before. Some of them tried to retreat, but they were instantly added to the growing population of the goblin pit. Oh, Hyunmin didn't even lift his spear once, but he turned an impoverished tribe into a den of absolute dogs. The boulder rain continues above while the spear wall presses from the front. They've seized the upper hand. He encouraged his boys to open their eyes and see the product of the hard work turning the tide of a losing battle. They were winning so hard that the Black Hill tribe's boss had to intervene. A red-skinned goblin that was taller and more muscular than any other goblin he'd seen marched to the front lines. His every step sent tremors throughout the ravine. He took a deep and menacing breath before unleashing a primal roar that sucked the air out of the narrow path. The big goblin squatted and gathered energy towards his feet. In one leap, he leaped over the pit filled with his brethren. He landed right in front of the phalanx formation, frightening Hyunmin's boys. The Lord of Black Hill, the Hobgoblin, was disappointed upon seeing how unimpressive the new Lord of the Red Rock Valley was. Oh, Hyunmin maintained his composure, but he was feeling a little tense. The Hobgoblin looked formidable. He used his silver tongue to rage bait the sunburnt-looking demon, and it was very effective. The Hobgoblin challenged him to leave the small fry out of the fight and let the Lord settle the beef one-on-one. Hyunmin looked at the big dumb oaf mockingly before giving a subtle nod to his boys up on the ridge. Next, he provoked the Hobgoblin further, posturing like a big shot. When asked if he was afraid to accept the challenge, Hyunmin continued signaling his boulder-slinging force to do their job by swinging his arms around. The Hobgoblin interpreted his odd movements as a pathetic show of fear. Trembling before the fight is a sign of a shitty lord. Finally, the stupid-ass Hobgoblin had had enough posturing and trash-talking. Before he could attack, a boulder the size of his head rocked his skull and shook his brain. It wasn't enough to knock him out. He looked up and demanded zero interference in his sacred duel. Instead of stopping, he was subjected to an even more severe rain of boulders. Those boys up in the ridge were sharp shooters. They buried that bastard in an instant. Some stones hit hard and fast enough to mangle the hobgoblin's body until he stopped breathing. Oh, Hyunmin doesn't give a damn about honor. Winning is all that matters. Why would he risk getting hurt when the battle's already won? With the hobgoblin out of the picture, the system recognized his victory over the Black Hill Goblins. Hyunmin raised his spear and loudly announced their W, lifting his force's spirits. The Red Rock Valley Goblins finally experienced their first win after losing every war that they've ever been in. There were some Black Hill Goblins who survived by crawling out of the pit. The spear line noticed the stragglers and ran to exterminate every last one of them. Before they could execute the remains of the losing side, Hyunmin halted their spears. His boys were confused as to why he stopped them from doing what winners do. In their mind, if they leave even a single Black Hill bastard, they'll just get attacked again in the future. Not to mention the torment they've experienced time and time again in the hands of that cruel tribe. Oh, Hyunmin didn't think that way. He thought his boys that killing a beaten foe just turns him into a corpse. Keep him alive, and he'll become a resource. And so, the great integration was put into motion. Hyunmin sat on his throne surrounded by his subjects and their pooled resources. According to the system, his territory was upgraded to level 2, and he absorbed 213 new residents, bringing the total to 260. They currently have a small stockpile of dried meat, some fruits, and numerous pieces of old leather. He also acquired a new dense infantry trait, which slightly increases his troops' morale and defense when in formation. The level up granted him wider access to information through the wiki, revealing his location to be the 12th floor of the underground demon realm. There are over 200 goblins to feed and very little food to do so. The numbers weren't looking too hot. At this rate, it will only be a matter of time before everyone dies of starvation. It would be ideal to start farming, but according to the wiki, ordinary agriculture was impossible on the 12th floor. If that was the case, then what was the deal with these round orange fruits? He asked the captured goblins where they were getting these fruits from, and he was met with silence. So he asserted that those who answer properly will be excluded from the torture list. Almost immediately, they started singing like birds. They confess that a big tree in the forest bears fruit. They secretly harvest the odd-looking crops at night. And so, Hyunmin picked out 3 random goblins from his trusted troop, and unlike before, they readily stepped forward. He tasked them with checking out the forest in question once before daybreak. The captured Black Hill Goblins hesitantly interjected that randomly sending someone into the forest might be a bad idea. They explained that the tree was guarded by something. No one's really seen the guardian of the trees. Those who've seen it never ever come back alive. Despite the risk, they still need to get some eyes on the area for these juicy fruits. Uneasy, the tied-up goblins asked if torture was still awaiting them. If it were up to the Red Rock Valley boys, they'd be glad to torment and kill the bullies who made their lives hell. Oh, Hyunmin had to shut them up by asking why they won the war in the first place. It wasn't because they fought well. It wasn't because of a polished strategy. They won simply because they were lucky. There is no guarantee that they'll get lucky again next time. Until the next battle, they must prepare more thoroughly for any variable. He was just bluffing when he threatened the new citizens with torture. Instead of wasting time hurting each other, everyone's energy would be better spent working. Through hard work, they could survive. The 3 goblins selected to scout the forest proceeded with utmost caution, staying low on the ground and making as little noise as possible. There were pesky bugs in the dense woods that made the silent approach extra hard. Still, they moved under the Lord's strict command that no matter what they see, they shouldn't touch a thing. Their job is to take a look and come back. After what felt like hours of nonstop crawling, one of the goblins spotted what they were searching for up above. Abundantly hanging low from the tree overhead were bundles of ripe orange fruits. It took all their willpower not to snatch it up right then and there. Carefully observing the tree, the moonlight showed a bright reflection around the fruits. Looking closer, the whole tree was covered by a thin and durable webbing of some creature. Down below, they saw multiple holes surrounded by red stains. One goblin touched the stain and smelled what the crimson fluid was. A single sniff was all it took for him to signal the other 2 to retreat. As they crawled backward away from the danger zone, one goblin blundered. His long ear touched one of the dangling webs. A slight touch was all it took to alert the monster lurking in the dark. The unlucky goblin was taken up the trees without a struggle. The remaining goblins watched in horror as one of them was turned into a midnight snack. The blood of their fellow goblin added more red stains to the ground. Now that they were spotted, all they could do was run for their lives. Back in the Red Rock Valley, Hyunmin continued extracting information from his new subjects. According to them, walking north leads to a desert area. They don't really have a word for desert, but they described a land made of sand. Gathering information this way takes forever, but he found out a decent bit about the 12th floor of the demon realm. To their left was the hillside, to the right was a winding river, up north was the forest and the land of sand. Hyunmin now has a rough idea of the topography. Just then, the 2 survivors from the scouting mission came running back home, horrified by what they had just experienced. They were huffing and puffing for air when they reached Lord Hyunmin. They told him that one of them was dragged to the trees and eaten by an unknown monster. The trio did their best to stay careful and observe, but they were still spotted. Hyunmin saw a piece of silk stuck to one of his boys and immediately connected the dots. According to their report, webs were wrapped around the fruit-bearing trees surrounded by bloody hole marks stamped into the ground. It was obvious that they were dealing with a spider, not some average house spiders either. These must be huge. The dense forest puts them at a disadvantage. One wrong step and they might get ambushed. In the worst case, they won't get any food, and they might lose a lot of goblins in the process. Hyunmin sighed. Why can't things ever be easy for him for once? If there were any other way to feed his subjects, he'd avoid the dangerous path. But there were none. So he commanded everyone to pack up. Operation Forest is now underway. While they were preparing to leave the Red Rock Valley, the poor goblin scout was being feasted upon by a giant, fuzzy arachnid. This son of a bitch was so big that it could swallow a goblin in one disgusting gulp. Oh, Hyunmin better bring one giant slipper to smack the crap out of this thing. With the Goblin Lord at the helm, they reached the edge of the woods without a problem. They went here without a solid plan of attack, but Hyunmin was on the case. He thought their mere presence would attract some spiders' attention, but those leggy bastards were really good at hide and seek. He needs more information, but he can't just send someone in there to charge in blind. Their supplies are dwindling more rapidly due to the sudden population increase. The food shortage was keeping everyone on edge and causing infighting among the horde. If this continues, they might start killing each other before starvation wipes them out. Waiting isn't the answer. Economical food rationing will only keep them going for so long. Hyunmin was constantly racking his brain for ideas to deal with the spiderwebs, but he kept coming up blank. While he was testing how strong it was using his teeth, he caught one of the baby goblins trying to sneak into the forest. He yelled at the little goblin, and the kid was terrified when he approached. Hyunmin already mandated that no one should act alone. He sent that kid back to the horde. They're not here to play around, so those in charge of looking after the kids should keep the little ones under control. To make matters worse, clouds covered the skies, making the night even darker. Lightning struck and thunder rumbled. The rain started pouring down. Thankfully, they found a cave nearby where everyone could fit to take shelter. Hyunmin never even considered that rain was possible within the demon realm. The torrential downpour came with thunder and lightning, no less. He tested how the web would react to rain, but there was no luck there. It just made the silk wet, nothing more. He joined the horde inside the cave and checked if everything was in order. If everything was all right, they should wait under the cover of the cavern until the rain stops. The goblins discussed amongst themselves, and ultimately decided to tell the Lord that everything wasn't all right. They took a head count and found that one goblin was missing. Hyunmin double-checked the head count and found that one of the green bastards was unaccounted for. According to the little ones, the runt wearing the red bandana went off to the woods by himself earlier, while no one was looking. Hyunmin felt a headache coming, so he forced himself to calm down. Maybe he should send a few goblins to look for the runt. But with a goblin's judgment, they would likely trigger a bundle of webs and get killed. The runt has little-ass legs. He couldn't have gotten too far. Hyunmin grabbed one of the sharpened wooden spears and set out to find the little rascal himself. He assured his horde that he'll be right back, so they should get some rest inside the cave. Rain continued pouring down, dampening his shoes, socks, and clothes. He just now realized that he was walking in a dense forest where anything could leap out at any moment. He'd be lying if he said he wasn't scared. However, he believes that willingly taking risks in a crisis is a mark of a true leader. Following the walk path, he found some little footprints on the muddy floor. He followed the prints until lightning struck a nearby area up ahead, halting his advance. Then, he heard a juvenile shriek and saw what looked like flames where the lightning touched the ground. Keeping his spear in attack mode, he approached the area lit up by the fire. From the burning area, he finally found the little runt crying in pain, running towards him. The runt's ass was burnt by the flame ignited by lightning. Hyunmin tossed the spear aside and caught the little guy leaping in his direction. The runt kept on moving erratically. You can't blame the little guy. His butt was on fire. To make him stop fussing, Hyunmin dunked the runt's ass into a nearby puddle. Finally, he stopped thrashing around and momentarily passed out from the shock. When he regained consciousness, he got an earful from the Lord for wandering off by himself and disobeying orders. The runt cried and reasoned that he simply wanted to get his little brother some fruit. This poor baby just wanted to take care of his little bro, who cries every day out of hunger. Hyunmin understood where the runt was coming from, but he must understand that what he did was reckless and dangerous. He almost burned to death just now. Speaking of burning, Hyunmin realized that he had never seen fire since he came to the demon realm. Taking advantage of the opportunity handed to him by the skies, he sacrificed his suit, tore it apart, and tied the fabric around the wooden spear. Disobeying their order to stay put in the cave, a few goblins braved the unknown forest in search of their lord. They heard a weird sound up ahead, so they followed it. Each of them was visibly terrified, but they kept on trudging on for the sake of saving their lord. In the middle of the dark, dense woods, their attention was drawn to a bright, burning light. When the Utsune realized that the light was moving towards them, they instinctively raised their wooden spears in fear. The flame was too bright and hot. They couldn't bring themselves to attack it. When they opened their eyes to the full picture, the concerned goblins were brought down to their knees. At that moment, they were breathless and overwhelmed by a foreign sense of wonder. A brilliant flame burning alone in the darkness was a sight they had never seen before. The one holding that flame, their lord and savior, looked like a god descending upon the demon realm. Hyunmin just advanced their tech several levels ahead just by securing that fire. He was confused when he saw some of his goblins randomly kneeling before him on the way back to the cave. He wanted to give them a scolding, but them being here actually worked out pretty well. Hyunmin grabbed a handful of webs from his pocket and showed his subordinates how powerful fire can be. A single spark, just a little bit of contact, that's all it takes to burn the strong string to ashes. The goblins looked like they had just seen him perform a miracle. Thanks to the little runt, they gained a handy weapon against those annoying spiders. Given his contributions, calling him a runt doesn't feel right anymore. So Hyunmin decided to give the little one a name. From now on, he will be referred to as Kim Prometheus. Kim Pro for short. What a goated name. As the one who brought goblinhood fire, the name was a perfect fit. The system notified him that the effect of naming had been activated for the first time. Kim Prometheus was bathed in the light of the world, his name officially recorded. For some unknown reason, the little guy levitated for a short moment. Hyunmin's interest was piqued, and he asked Kim Pro if he felt any different. The other goblins didn't know what the hell was happening, but they repeatedly chanted Kim Pro's name. Now was not the time to get all excited, though. Hyunmin ordered everyone to gather around so they could all get proper names. Afterward, it'll be their turn to mess with those ugly spiders.